Today we'll be talking about thoughty scallywag Abigail White. I'm Rugburn.
And I'm Pickled Landon.
And this is Tombstone Tourist. So Abigail White's going to be who we're talking about today. She had an interesting upbringing. I kind of want to just give some backstory because I feel like this could have developed who she became to be as an adult because of the experiences she had as a child. So when I say the very beginning, we're going to run it all the way back to when Abigail was a 2-year-old. And one of her first interactions, or seeing male and female interactions, was her blood father would abuse her mother. And this was at the age of 2. Eventually, at the age of 4, her mother splits from her father. She gets a stepfather. Well, stepfather jumps in. Stepfather starts abusing Abigail in a weird enough turn of events. That goes on for some time. Eventually, Abigail is moved to foster care with her grandparents. Along this time, around the age of 13, she starts taking antidepressants. So she's taking antidepressants. Things start to look up, though. At the age of 15, she gets with this 14-year-old named Brad. Brad's important to the story. He turns into this high school sweetheart kind of relationship that ends up blossoming further down the line. So we'll have to keep him in mind. It is worth noting that instead of getting a job when she came to age, the only real job she's ever had is OnlyFans.
Nothing against OnlyFans, but I do find it to be a bit of a red flag, especially given the nature of what we're talking about. I also believe that if your first interaction with seeing your parents interact with each other between a man and a woman is witnessing violence, that can have an outcome or an effect on your entire life, the way you deal with relationships and the way that you approach relationships. Couple that with antidepressants, having to live in foster homes, which means you've had to change houses a few times. I don't see anybody that's gone through that working a normal job in general.
I personally think it's just lack of overall father figure that could be a lot of this, seeking male validation, wanting to kind of get male attention that she might have been deprived of at a young age, kind of factoring into her choice as to do OnlyFans as opposed to go with a more standard line of work, that she just really just wanted some male validation, and that was her way of getting it, as well as getting a paycheck.
Yeah, and OnlyFans can pay really, really well. If that's one of the only options you have, then why not take it? I mean, if I had the option, I might take it if it was good enough money.
Yeah, it can pay well, but we can also remember the average earner on OnlyFans, I think, is 180 USD.
What? Just going back to what I said, to me, it's a red flag. Nothing wrong with it, but as far as relationships and stuff like that, it can form into an issue or a sore spot between people.
Yeah, possibly create jealousy, bickering, arguments, things of that nature.
Just general overall tension.
So she also went by a nickname. The fake Barbie is what she liked to call herself. And at first she was rather successful. She was making good money. She made 50,000 pounds the first year of this whole thing. But there's a flip side to that. She went from 50,000 pounds a year down to 12,000 pounds a year in her following year, and then had to rely heavily on Brad's income to support herself. So at this point, Brad's kind of footing the bill for everything. She's still doing her devious activities online while not getting paid that much for those activities. It's at this time that they kind of start having problems in their relationship. They have 4 kids, but here's the kicker. One of those kids is not his.
What?
It's from an unknown party.
Wow. Ooh.
So it's apparent, and I think can go without being said, but I'll just spell it out. She cheated on him at least one time that we know of.
I was going to say, they've been together since they were 14 and 15. There must have been a spot in there where the baby got made.
Absolutely. And the thing is, they stayed together supposedly through this whole time. So the only way that a baby can come into the picture from a different man is if she's being promiscuous, cheating on the side, not being faithful, or maybe they had an open relationship. But to my understanding, that was not the case in this situation.
Yeah, this is kind of what I was getting at. That's why I see a red flag in the OnlyFans thing, is that this is the type of tension that builds in relationships from that type of... That's a job meant for single people, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at.
I 100% agree to that. But, I mean, some people can kind of get away with it, but I do believe that the average person is going to start to feel jealous, feel some type of way. And then not only that, sometimes it can allow other men to breach y'all's circle.
Part of that interaction is obviously messaging and stuff like that.
It's obviously hypersexualized because of the type of content that's usually sold and traded back and forth on OnlyFans. So, you know, that becomes a kind of a big issue, but supposedly Brad handles this well.
And she was starting to use drugs at this point, if I'm correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she was doing cocaine at the time, which could explain why Brad had to foot the bill for a lot of things. I mean, 12,000 doesn't stretch too far, or 12,000 pounds doesn't
Yeah,
stress
it's a
out.
very low paying retail job at best.
So on March 19th, 2021, things take a little bit of a turn for the worse. They get into a domestic dispute. Abigail ends up stabbing Brad in the arm. This is non-fatal, however, and Brad lies about what happened. So there's no legal action taken from this situation either. And against what he should probably do, Brad ends up staying with Abigail through this situation.
I'm going to say this for everybody out there one time. If your partner has stabbed you, you need to leave and get help. Brad
Yeah.
needed to leave and get help.
Also, what is with these OnlyFans chicks stabbing people? Like Courtney Clenny and then her now, she's just knife happy, man. It just seems to be a somewhat of a running trend of OnlyFans women just wanting to stab people.
Now, not to be weird, but this is England, and England doesn't have a lot of guns.
That's true too.
Yeah,
that
there's
is something to take into account.
Yeah, they like the knives.
So, a little less than a week after the stabbing that we just talked about, on March 25th, 2021, they're at a pub. They're drinking, they're chilling. Abigail gets agitated, ends up punching one of the patrons there. The patron punches her back. I can only imagine the headache that this is causing Brad. He's probably just going through it at this moment. Well, Abigail, being the thoughty scallywag she is, decides that she's going to spit on Brad's friend that's there too, causing even more drama, just continuously building and escalating this situation up, making it worse and worse and worse. And after she spits on Brad's kind of, I guess, de-escalates the situation and is like, hey, we need to go home. Well, when they're about to leave, he ends up telling his friend that I'm dead when I get home. Later that night, neighbor hears a scream. The neighbor would come over to find Brad stabbed. Brad would be rushed to the hospital where he would later die. Abigail claims that Brad tried to kill himself during this whole situation.
Nah, I don't believe it.
Wow. So this went from a small domestic all the way to just full-blown death.
I don't know if I'd consider stabbing a small domestic, but yeah.
You're right. I get, that is a very bad descriptor. We're going to call that a very volatile domestic. Yeah. But it's led to the ultimate domestic, which is death.
Yeah, and there is kind of a pattern building because she did stab him again. And I think it's kind of wild that already Abigail is kind of seeming to try to build an alibi, it seems. She already in her head, she's like, yes, he tried to kill himself, which it seems a little far-fetched considering the ways one might kill themselves. I mean, stabbing yourself, I can see hanging yourself or, something along those lines.
Nowadays, you usually see either medication, hanging, a firearm of some type.
Out of all the ways you can do it,
Yeah.
to stab yourself,
That's like somebody saying they're going to drown themselves. It's possible, but it's the most painful thing you could possibly do, or like lighting yourself on fire.
highly unlikely,
Yeah.
I would say.
I think it's also building a profile because we know that Brad stayed. So we know that within the relationship, he's the one that's willing to make things work. And we can tell from her agitation that she's the fiery spitball one. She's the one
Wild card.
not causing all the tension, but she's a wild card. There's issues here.
I can't believe a word that comes out of that boy's mouth. I have to beat the living daylights out of him for him to tell me the truth, and he still don't tell me the truth. He only tells me the truth when he thinks I'm gonna kill him. Like when I get a knife out, like when I stab him, like, I just don't get this kid. But obviously, I have no limit when I get angry, and like obviously he said that I need help with that because people are generally saying to me, one of you are going to end up dead, like, and I fully believe that I'm quite capable of killing him if he hurts me again, or I'm going to end up being in prison.
I don't think they should have been together, in my opinion. I think they were very toxic together.
I don't think they should have been together anymore at this point either. I think the issue is when there's so much history, some people end up toughing it out just because it's like, I don't want to throw away this much time, and they're afraid to throw away that much time. Well, you can throw away that much time.
Yeah.
It's okay.
You have to take in mind, too, their kids. Abigail may have thought that it was on her that she wanted to leave, that doing this might make her kids like her. And Brad, on the other end, may think that leaving Abigail would make his kids not give them the best opportunity, I guess, in life. And a lot of times I think people stay for their kids. Like
so you
said,
think it was just purely to make it work for the kids?
I don't think necessarily, but I think that is a big, huge factor. But at the end of the day, like you said, you can. you can do whatever you need to do to make sure that you got what's going on. Because if you're in a better place mentally, your kids are going to be in a better place mentally. If both the parents are messed up from being with each other, they're still going to mess those kids up.
So police, obviously, they have to do a search of things, kind of figure out what happened, do their due diligence, right? Well, they start to go through her phone, and, there's hundreds of threatening text messages between Abigail and Brad. Not Brad threatening Abigail, but Abigail threatening Brad. Not only that, she was Google searching things that had to do with stabbing people, which is rather alarming when you look how Brad died, and I think puts another nail into her coffin.
Yeah, it's a little coincidental that she would be looking up stabbing somebody, and then he stabbed himself to, end it all.
Yeah, I would say more than coincidence, no doubt. That just seems odd. And people, if you're going to do a crime, do not Google about it. What is wrong with you criminals? Why do you keep doing that?
They will look up your search history. We did a whole video on that. But again, with the text messages, this keeps building a very large case against the toxicity. These people, as much as they loved each other, and it's clear they did, they've been together for a long time, they had no business being in a relationship romantically or being around each other too often. This was one of those cases where you get a coffee, and maybe, in a year you see them again, or maybe in a few months.
Probably not even that. But
Probably not.
So Abigail, they found her to have borderline personality disorder.
Oh, there's a big surprise.
So she had that. The judge went ahead and sentenced her to 18 years before she'd be eligible for parole in 2039. So 2039, she's her first eligible parole date. However, she most likely will not get that because of the extensive text history that the judge found between her and Brad, the threatening manner as to which things took place. And this leads us to kind of believe that she will be doing more time than her first parole date.
Yeah, given the nature of what happened. Her borderline personality disorder, I wanted to touch on that a little bit because we talked earlier about her upbringing and how that could form a personality in somebody that's not necessarily good for a relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a phrase that I've heard used, it's actually from another podcast, but it's that mental health is not necessarily your fault, but it is your responsibility.
I agree to that 100% because you need to keep it in check. You can't control what necessarily has caused you to be a certain way, but you can control your actions and how you treat it and how you're responsible for it, essentially.
Yes.
You being medicated, things of that nature, going to see a therapist, whatever those needs might be.
And I think that plays a huge role here in why she's not going to get let out. I feel like a lot of people will say that this isn't her fault because of what happened to her, but I would argue that it is. That it is her fault because she's not regulating what has happened to her. It's not her fault that it happened, but she's not taking care of herself. She didn't take care of herself mentally enough to deal with whatever it is she was dealing with.
Yeah, I agree 100%. There is, however, a silver lining in this whole situation, if you care to hear the silver lining situation. So Brad was clearly liked. Hundreds of people attended this charity soccer event, raising 7,000 pounds for him after his passing. So clearly people cared about Brad.
Yeah, it sounds like he had a lot of good friends. And it sounds like his personality was that type where you did want to be around him. And that's probably was a double-edged sword and what led him somewhat to the situation with Abigail.
Maybe he was just an overly forgiving person or something along those lines.
Just very easygoing. Just willing to let stuff go. Too much so, in my opinion.
There's another thing as to why I believe Abigail will not be getting her first parole in 2039. The judge had some choice words for her, and we've decided to pull some quotes from the judge, just a select few as to kind of paint a picture for the audience as to kind of how the judge feels about good old Abigail White.
The judge states, "These messages make for a chilling reading. You demanded almost constant attention. Messages show that when he did not do what you wanted, you became increasingly volatile. In my judgment, at the time you stabbed him, you did intend to kill him. You had threatened to do this many times. You did stab him in the leg, leaving a scar, and then a couple of weeks before you killed him, you stabbed him in the arm. The third aggravating factor is that you stabbed him in the presence of your 3-year-old son, who said, 'Mommy stabbed Daddy.'"
Mic drop. Boom.
Yeah.
He's done with her and all her bullshit. It's clear that she's been used to getting her way, and she thought she would get away with this. Not today.
Nope. They sentenced her to 18 years. 18 years. They got you for 18 years.
On that note, is there anything you want to say in closing on this topic?
Honestly, I have nothing left.
If you're stabbed, go ahead and leave your partner, as we've learned multiple times here on Tombstone Tourist. Don't forget to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and comment on what you'd like us to do next or what stories you'd like to see us cover in the future. I'm Rugburn,
And I'm Pickled Landon.
and this is Tombstone Tourist.